My daughters are growing up with 4 languages: English from me, French from their dad, Spanish and Valenciano from school. I want to share with you lots of easy ways you can help support your multilingual or bilingual children that I've learned along my journey but really wish I knew right back at the start. And I think you'll find some of them really surprising. For example, did you know if you talk or sing or communicate with your child whilst they're swinging, they're far more likely to retain that information? Amazing, isn't it? Listen on to hear more. I'm Lisa and this is Wriggle and Roll. We've all heard the reassurances. Babies and young children are like sponges. They just soak everything up. And whilst I agree it is easier for children to acquire languages than for older people to learn them, that does not mean to say it is easy. Sure, just as with any other skill, you'll have people on all ends of the spectrum. You'll have people that seem to take to it super easy and make it look easy, and you'll have people on the other ends of the spectrum that really find something challenging, and then you'll have the likes of most people sitting somewhere in the middle, and languages aren't any different. I'm qualified as an English teacher and I've taught children and adults in Spain as well as Korea, so I've got lots of examples, not just from my own children. No matter where your child seems to sit on the spectrum of learning ease, it can never do any harm to support their development from as early an age as possible in as many ways as possible. So here, as promised, are some of the things that I have found really useful across my journey. So number 1, get them on the swings. Even better if it's a hammock. This was an amazing thing I learned when my oldest daughter started speech therapy, by which time she was already 3. So again, something I really wish that I had known much earlier on. We often talk about the 5 senses, but in actual fact there are 7 senses, including one called the vestibular system. The vestibular system coordinates body movements, helps with balance and equilibrium, and even helps develop muscle tone. So what's that got to do with language, I hear you say? Well, in order for us to develop any skill, all of our different sensories need to be working as well as possible and working well together. And in this case, an underdeveloped vestibular system has been linked to language development issues. So the more activities that help support and develop the vestibular system that we can help our children engage in, even better. These include riding a bike, going down the slide, running, swimming, swinging. And fascinating fact, reciting vocab, communicating, singing whilst your child is swinging means that they are far more likely to retain that information. Amazing, right? Number 2, help your child to not feel shy about speaking other languages. So one of the challenges that my oldest daughter faced was that her language was just at the cusp of developing when we went into a 7-week strict lockdown in Spain, whereby we had to stay in our house. At home, we speak as a family in English. So the great thing was that it really helped encourage her development and her confidence in English. Then when she returned to school, the problem was that she had developed a sort of shyness and hesitancy to speak in Spanish because she wasn't sure if she was going to get it wrong. I think that's something we as adults can all relate to, but I was really surprised that a child would feel that way too, and it wasn't something I'd thought to look out for. So the really important thing is that we show our children the most important thing is communicating. However we can get that information out, even if we have to use a word from a different language, there's really no shame in just having a go. And how can we encourage that in them? By modeling behavior that we want to see in them ourselves. So wherever possible, in my case, we spend time with other Spanish families so that my daughter can see me speaking to other people in Spanish. I speak Spanish, but not fluently. I often make mistakes which can make me feel very shy, but I force myself to talk and put myself out there again so that my daughter sees me modeling that behavior. That the most important is that you're making an effort and you're talking to people and you're communicating. Making the odd grammatical mistake really doesn't matter. And if your child does make a mistake, they use a word incorrectly, or they say a sentence grammatically incorrectly, anything along those lines, then instead of drawing attention to that mistake by telling them that they said it wrong, simply what you want to do is repeat the sentence back to them correctly and continue on with the conversation so that they hear it correctly, but not in a way that feels really critical to reinforce that shyness of getting it wrong. So if my daughter says to me, I want that car blue, I'll just say to her, great, you want this blue car? Fantastic. Here you go, here's the blue car. Number 3, which closely links to the one before, but is a slightly different point, exposure as much as possible to the different languages that your children speak. So I always speak to my daughters in English. That is mummy's language. I want that to be clear to them that that's our language. But they live in a multilingual world, so I want to incorporate that every day in their lives. So as an example, we have a Yoto player. I really recommend these, by the way, if anybody doesn't have one, but if you don't, there's plenty of ways you can achieve the same result. But for those of you that don't know them, basically you can pop cards in the top, different stories, different radio channels, and you can get them in different languages. So we have them in all of the girls' languages, in English, French, and Spanish. So they just interchange them as they want. So one minute they'll be listening to a story of Pinocchio in French, and the next minute they'll be listening to the radio and the presenter will be speaking in Spanish. So it starts to become normal to them, this multilingual world that they live in. And that can be converted over to all different types of media. So if they like watching a particular TV program, then you can actually often change the language and have them watch it in a different language. Or songs, they can watch nursery rhymes in English, or they can also learn songs in Spanish. YouTube is great for that. Just type in the language of the nursery rhymes that you want and you'll find lots of resources. And the more engaged you can be with your children as they're doing those activities, the better. So if they are watching a film, the difficulty can be that they just end up watching the visual and aren't really taking in the listening. Of course, it can still be great because they are subconsciously hearing that foreign language. But what can also be great is if you engage with them. So ask them, oh, how is that person feeling right now? What colour is their t-shirt? Not to the point where you're annoying them in the film, of course, but looking for them to interact with the material that they're absorbing. Instead of just putting songs on for them to listen to or watch, how about interacting with them whilst they're listening to those songs? Hint, hint, that's what my videos are for. Number 4, talking about interactive ways to encourage language, games and apps. There are so many games where the children will just feel like they're playing and having a great time and having fun, but we as parents can encourage that development of language alongside it. And there are lots of games, I can pop links below, that are specifically designed for that purpose, but there really isn't a single game that can't be used to emphasize language slightly. So for example, my girls, one of their favorite games is Hungry Hippos. So as we're setting it up, I just ask them questions. How many hippos are there? What color are the hippos? How do you think the hippos are feeling? And again, of course, depending on their age, you may provide those answers for them if they're not yet able to. I think the hippos look hungry. Do you agree? And if your little one is old enough and you allow them to spend time on the iPad, rather than just mindlessly watching content where they're not possibly taking in any of the language, there are so many really fantastic interactive games and apps that can really help support language development. We have a number that are just in English, but my oldest daughter and I, and actually my youngest daughter, even though she's only 2, she joins in a lot of the time, also really enjoy doing Duolingo Kids. And for those of you that don't know, it's an app whereby you can sign in and each day there's a class that you can do, and you get, in the kids version, a star every time you log in for a new day, and those stars can be collected to get stickers. And the great thing is, it helps my Spanish vocabulary as well. And I promise this is not a sponsored ad. I've got nothing to benefit from recommending any of these things to you, other than I have found them to be really, really helpful for my daughter. Number 5, reading stories. This probably sounds an obvious one, but it is absolutely one not to be overlooked. A lot of people do bedtime stories with their children. We certainly do in our household. And again, we use it as an opportunity to encourage our multilingual world. So I will always read a story in English, my husband will read one in French, and then one of us will read a book in Spanish. Occasionally I read one in French and he reads one in English to show them that there's really no problem in speaking or reading another language, even if you have a slight accent. But most of the time, we like them to try and hear the authentic accent. The most important, as I mentioned before, is that they see you being comfortable with those languages. I completely appreciate some of you watching this may not speak any of the other languages that your children are exposed to. So again, just do what you can. Get something where they can listen to it and you listen alongside them. Do a class where you can also be learning with them. It's not necessary that you're fluent in the languages that they speak in. And one last bonus tip. The more sensory exposure that our little ones can have, the more they learn how to process that information and all of their senses can work together, which as we've seen is really important for things like language development. So as well as being really fun, the baby classes on my channel are designed to do just that, provide lots of different stimulation for your baby's senses. So if you haven't yet had a chance, go and check out some of those sessions and do a class with your baby. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it really useful. Please drop me a comment, let me know how many languages is your little one growing up with, what things have you found helpful, what challenges have you had. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Lisa and you've been watching Wriggle and Roll.